An Alabama woman faces life in prison after she killed a man she says raped her and attacked her brother. Earlier this month, the New Yorker highlighted Brittany Smith's case and her fight to clear her name. It's a battle women across the country are facing. The article's author, Elizabeth Flock, went beyond just one woman's story and looked into the gender divide of the Stand Your Ground defense. Elizabeth joins me now from Taos, New Mexico. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote this very powerful piece discussing how powerless women are in certain circumstances. Tell us what drew you to this story.
Well, I heard about Brittany's story almost a year ago now, and at the time she had been spent 4 months in jail and was in a mental institution, and all I knew was that she had shot and killed the man that she said raped her and threatened her life and attacked her brother. So I was curious to find out more and why this woman was being criminalized for what seemed like a pretty clear self-defense case. I then spent 9 months interviewing folks, in her family in Jackson County, the man who allegedly raped her, his family, and really looking deeply into this case to try to understand what was going on. And as I looked into Brittany's case, I found quite a lot of other cases like hers in which it seemed that women with strong self-defense claims were ending up being charged with murder or manslaughter, and in some cases going to prison for quite a long time.
Explain, I think it would do our viewers justice for you to explain the difference between the different types of self-defense laws, including stand your ground, the castle doctrine, and the duty to retreat.
Sure. So this case revolves around Stand Your Ground, and Stand Your Ground is a statute that now exists in 33 states. In Alabama, it was instituted in 2006, and Stand Your Ground says that it's legal to use lethal force to defend yourself against threats or perceived threats with no duty to retreat. So what that means is it goes a little bit beyond a typical self-defense law, which basically says that, if you can get away, you probably should. But in Stand Your Ground, you really can stay where you are. You don't have to try to run away. And so I think what has become quite controversial is Stand Your Ground, as a lot of people have said, well, maybe it goes too far. Obviously, if people have the ability to get away, maybe they should be doing that instead of standing where they are. But others say that it gives a lot of protection to people who need it in situations where they feel like if they ran away, maybe they'd be shot, maybe they'd be hurt. And so they feel like it offers more protection. But what I was interested in looking into was a lot of people have looked at whether there's a racial bias in Stand Your Ground, and I was looking into whether there might be a gender bias as well.
And what'd you find, Elizabeth?
Well, interestingly, it's a mixed picture, but I worked with a researcher who looked at FBI data, and he found that men were 10% more likely to get justifiable homicides than women overall. In Alabama, they were 25% more likely to get justifiable homicides. So that's a pretty big gender gap. Now, when he looked more specifically at Stand Your Ground, he found that overall Stand Your Ground has actually helped both men and women, but in some states that's definitely not the case. Florida is one where a researcher has found a gender divide, particularly when it comes to domestic cases. And of course, this case is taking place in Alabama, and the researcher found that really there were zero findings of justifiable homicides since Stand Your Ground had been instituted. Now, there have been a few women who've won Stand Your Ground in recent years in Alabama, but the number is very small.
Reading your reporting and reading about Brittany's story, it made me think of Centoya Brown, who also spent 15 years in jail for very similar circumstances. She claimed it was self-defense, and ultimately the governor of Tennessee agreed and released her from prison. But just this week, Brittany lost her Stand Your Ground hearing. I wonder what kind of precedent that sets for women across the country that are facing charges similar to hers.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've found is that basically women only seem to win these cases if it's the most clear-cut case imaginable, or if there's a huge amount of national attention, like what happened with Centoya Brown. Then the judge might look at something and say, oh, wow, I think I need to reconsider this. But despite now national attention to Brittanys case, she did lose her stand your ground hearing. That ruling came in this week. Basically, if she had won her stand your ground ruling, she would have gotten immunity from further prosecution. But since she's lost, she's likely going to go to trial, and she is facing 20 years to life. So I think a lot of people question whether a woman who shot someone in cold blood and, sort of like planned out this elaborate murder or something should be treated the same as a woman who, let's say, kills her abusive boyfriend or killed someone who attacked them. And there's some question about, whether it was in the moment. There's a lot of cases that sort of fall between. I mean, Brittanys case seems pretty clear self-defense because she says that he was attacking her brother in the moment, but there's others that aren't so clear. But it seems that many courts are treating them the same as if it was sort of like a cold-blooded murder, and a lot of these women are going to prison for 20 years to life.
Yeah, and in that rejection of her stand your ground hearing, the judge in one of the, I guess, comments made that she could have run away, and I find that remarkable. That would be something that would be applicable to a situation where most of us have never been in a situation like this. So the idea of running away is what you hear time and time again, generally directed at women, for example, that are in abusive relationships, or children that have no opportunity to get away from parents who abuse them. And so I wonder, and I don't know if this is it fair to wonder and to ask the question if this outcome would have been different if it happened outside of the South?
I don't know that there's research literature to support that. I think a lot of the women in Jackson County, Alabama themselves say that they feel that things are different being in Alabama, being in the South. A lot of the women I've spoken to, many of whom weren't even connected with the case, volunteered domestic violence stories to me, said they were frustrated that the police weren't doing anything, that courts weren't doing anything. They said that they felt it was the culture of the South, and a lot of them said they wanted to leave Jackson County as a result. But the unfortunate thing is there's not a lot of data. That was sort of a recurring theme in this story, is like when you try to pin down how many women have been over-criminalized when they had convincing self-defense claims, or is the problem worse in Alabama than it is in New York, there's actually not a lot of data oftentimes to support that. And so it's really frustrating because you're left with anecdotal research.
And we just put up a startling statistic here on the screen, Elizabeth. 40%, the stand your ground law is the probability of conviction, 40% for a male defendant in a domestic case, 80% for a female defendant in a domestic case. And so I hope that as you continue your reporting and you continue to follow along Brittanys Smith's case, you'll come back and talk to us about it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Elizabeth Flock, thank you very much.